start
Hello, this is our webinar with the City Efficiency Leadership Council. It's baked in, keeping the lights on during extreme weather events with Gavin, Dillingham. So we are the Southcentral Partnership for Energy Efficiency as a resource, and we're the ones who are sponsoring and hosting this webinar. I'm Sean Auckland, I'm the Local Government Program Manager at SPHERE, and I will be moderating questions at the end. A little bit about SPHERE. SPHERE's mission is to accelerate the adoption of advanced building systems and energy efficient products and services in South Central United States. We cover Oklahoma and Texas, but we're one of 6 regional energy efficiency organizations. Our work is policy, building codes, high performance buildings, and local government. And with local government, we assist local government agencies with their data reporting, data analysis, looking at consumption of energy and utilities, as well as our membership is advocacy organizations, cities, ESCOs, manufacturers, trade associations, and utilities. So in this name of this program, it's City Efficiency Leadership Council. This event is a part of it, but for those of you who are less familiar with the program, City Efficiency Leadership Council is a partnership program with the State Energy Conservation Office to support outreach and education focused on supporting public sector energy management, again, in Texas and Oklahoma. Cities in the title, but we do offer these resources and conversations to all sorts of public sector entities, including counties, higher education, universities, and school districts. So I have a few announcements before we get started in the webinar. And today we're also offering continuing education units and credits, but you have to fill out the survey. Also, if you're calling in, if I don't see your name on the attendee list, please put on the survey what your phone number is, so I can give you the CEU. And we also have a few upcoming events that I'm pretty excited about. So with the City Efficiency Leadership Council, we host virtual roundtables, and these roundtables are unique because they're only for local governments. So vendors and nonprofits, unfortunately, aren't allowed at this table, but we can organize roundtables that have everyone welcome. But these specific ones are just for local governments, so you can have conversations. And this one, we're going to have a presenter, Heather Drapels, Austin's Water's climate protection consultant. She's going to be speaking on strategies for adapting to a changing climate together. And what this is it's highlighting a new report, Leading Practices in Climate Adaptation from Water Utility Climate Alliance. And they've been a leading leader in climate adaptation for over a decade. And the reason why we're inviting them in is because the space of energy and water are interconnected, and we're finding that more and more in our extreme events. Whenever you don't have energy to support our water systems go down. And then whenever we don't have water to support our energy systems and cooling, then there's issues as well. So I think that the information that she has is great information to take whenever you're working with energy or water and resiliency. And so that virtual roundtable, there's 2 more, one on November 4th and one on November 18th. And then we also have another webinar on November 10th, a dozen practical energy saving operation strategies. And it's from Austin Water. And the speaker is Ayman Benjamin. He's an engineer who's the operation division director. And he'll go through a dozen currently practiced strategies that provide an integrated framework for decision makers across an organization evaluating and integrating their organization's efforts to improve water operations and resiliency and affordability. And he talks about a lot of different things that the City of Austin has integrated for energy savings. And then we also have on December 9th, a workshop specifically to assist people who are in the non-attainment or near attainment region who need to report to the State Energy Conservation Office on their utility usage. And we'll go through and have two different people on the panel. And one is with the State Energy Conservation Office, SECO, as well as a representative from Austin Round Rock, a Georgetown region, talking about their experience in gathering the data to report. And then we'll have opportunities for lots of questions. And last but not least, we have a chat box. Please put your questions, comments in there. I will be answering questions and moderating at the end. If we have extra time, Gavin has a pretty good presentation. It'll be lasting for about 30 minutes. Hopefully we'll also have some space for a discussion. But last but not least, I will be dropping in a survey in the chat, and please answer the survey. This is where we get information and how we can improve these webinars. And then also what you're interested in and what issues that you have and how we can help you find solutions. So without further ado, Dr. Dillingham, Gavin Dillingham is the Director for Clean Energy Policy and Director of the U.S. Department of Energy, Southcentral and Upper West Combined Heat and Power, TAP. He joined HARC in 2012 where he leads a multi-stakeholder efforts focusing on policy programs to improve the climate resilience of power infrastructure and built environment and help usher in the energy transition via a variety of clean energy initiatives. He received a bachelor's degree from Texas Tech University. So any of you Texas Tech supporters out there or alumni. And his PhD is from Rice University. He holds a climate change professional certification and association from the Association of Climate Change Officers, and a sustainability associate from the Institute for Sustainable Professionals. So Gavin, this is a great opportunity for you. I'm going to stop sharing and you can load your presentation. And I'm going to turn my video and sound off. And if you want to test.
Thanks, John.
Okay, great.
All right, everyone see the presentation okay? John, look good to you?
Yes, looks great.
Cool. All right, well, I really very much appreciate the opportunity to come speak today about resilience in Texas. How do we continue to work towards improving our power system resilience, especially at critical infrastructure? And so today I'm going to be covering a variety of different topics. So I do, the presentation's titled "It's Baked In," which largely focuses on we likely will continue to see a variety of extreme weather events, regardless of kind of some of the efforts we make to decarbonize our power systems. But at the same time, it's still highly important that we focus on energy efficiency and reducing emissions and making sure that we lessen CO2 in the atmosphere as much as we can here. And so we're going to be covering a variety of topics. First of all, for those that are new to CHP, the combined heat and power, also known as cogeneration, we'll be doing an overview of that. We'll also be talking about decarbonization in CHP. I know many of you work on climate action planning and figuring out ways to reduce emissions within your communities. And so CHP and CHP microgrids are being found to be a significant help in that regard. And then you couple that with the resilience benefits it provides, you can have some pretty key benefits associated with this on both decarbonization and resilience. And then looking at a variety of tools and resources that are available for free at no cost via the Department of Energy that will help do these assessments for you and allow you to figure out what's the best opportunity for you in that regard. So to start with, we'll look at CHP, the Combined Heat and Power Overview. Quickly, just a little bit about the TAPs. That's the Technical Assistance Partnerships. There's about 10 of us around the country. As Sean mentioned, we do the Southcentral and the Upper West, so we cover about 11 states. And most of the work we do is focused on either end user engagement, where we do a variety of presentations, tours, workshops, et cetera, to really help people better understand how combined heat and power works, how it works with microgrids. If you're looking at solar plus storage, is CHP a good alternative to include within that microgrid, and how do you optimize those systems and make sure you have the most resilient, low emission on-site generation possible. And to do that, we provide a variety of no-cost technical services. So really that early stage analysis and screening to help people understand whether or not CHP microgrids could be a good fit for them or not. And so we end up doing, several dozen of those a year or so across our regions. A lot of the work we do is with states and counties and cities, universities, wastewater treatment plants, data centers, food processing, et cetera. So across a variety of different areas there. So quickly, what is CHP? I'll go into more detail in a second, but very high level, CHP is on-site power generation as well as providing on-site thermal services there. And the efficiency comes largely from when you compare it to a power plant that's potentially providing power from a further distance, where you have that line loss, where you have to produce more energy to get the energy you need at the site. And you have a separate boiler or a separate, cooling system there. CHP can kind of do both of those at the same time, which allows you to just have a higher efficiency system there. And essentially how it works is you have an engine or a turbine, and we're starting at the bottom left here. The fuel used is typically natural gas, but we're going to talk about a variety of other sources that are becoming available and becoming more popular for CHP. But anyway, you have that fuels the turbine or the reciprocating engine, turns the generator, and then you create electricity for a site. As well as we see some places that are generating additional electricity to export to the grid based on potential economic benefit they may receive, potentially a beneficial rate they may have. And I'll give an example of one of the universities in Texas that's doing a really cool job at generating additional revenue and really mitigating energy costs with their CHP system. The efficiency comes with the heat recovery unit or the heat exchanger that grabs that waste heat and uses it for steam, hot water, dehumidification. You can use it for a variety of domestic hot water steam needs, but you can also use it for cooling. And we have some really interesting examples in Texas where the thermal is being used for absorption chillers. One is in a data center in Spring, Texas with Southwestern Energy. So in any case, both cooling and heating in that regard. Next one, CHP has traditionally been seen as providing large applications. And so when you typically think about CHP, or if you're familiar with it and been thinking about it or in the industry for a while, you think about those large systems that are along the ship channel that are several hundred megawatts in size. That's really has not been the case as much anymore. Most of the studies that we end up doing, the analysis we end up doing, are for systems that between 1 to 3 megawatts. And we are also seeing a growing number of systems that are more in the kilowatt size, so 250 kilowatts, 500 kilowatts, but it can go down much smaller to 10 kilowatts. So a wide variety of applications for this. And there's actually these new packaged CHP systems that are available that really lessen a lot of the design and cost associated with these. They're largely kind of plug and play systems there. So a lot more flexibility and a lot more opportunity to decarbonize and reduce or improve resilience at sites. The benefits of CHP, kind of alluded to many of these, but once again, the efficiency benefits that comes from having that power on site. A lot of the key things we're going to be focusing on today is more on the energy reliability and resilience benefits that CHP can provide. And you're seeing a growing deployment of these with utilities actually, as they see it as a benefit as called a non-wire alternative to help improve grid reliability and reduce grid congestion there. And once again, as we'll talk a little bit more, it's seen as a significant factor to reduce emissions, both criteria, pollutants such as NOx and particulate matter, but also reduction of carbon dioxide or CO2 there. We have a growing amount of interest in trying to figure out how CHP can help incorporate renewables on site. There's a lot of discussions we have about solar plus storage and grid flexible buildings, and how does CHP play a role in that regard. And so we're very much proponents in really trying to find ways in which you can have a microgrid system that's resilient, reliable, can operate 24/7 and provide those services 365 days a year there. And so we've actually been doing some recent studies, most recently with the city of Houston, looking at solar plus storage plus CHP at critical infrastructure, and really trying to take into account all the different power sources that allow for a resilient and reliable on-site system, especially for sites that are used as shelters or used with first responders or have to have a critical public health need associated with them. I mentioned earlier that utilities are becoming a bit more favorable for CHP. Historically, they had seen it as a threat. Now they see it as a great opportunity to improve the reliability and resilience of their system without necessarily having to go do a full rate case. And that's also largely because the public utility commissions have been pushing back on some of these rate cases, seeing they're too expensive, concerns about stranded costs, et cetera. And so utilities are looking at the placement of storage, solar plus storage, of CHP systems in strategically placed areas to reduce congestion. And so we're looking at and trying to work with organizations that potentially have a high load in areas where there's high congestion or issues with reliability. And utilities are becoming much more willing to work in this space and provide benefits, rebates, incentives associated with those systems. I mentioned earlier about the whole issue around decarbonization and CHP. There had been a lot of questions around, well, you're using a natural gas-fired system. How is that going to help decarbonize our grid or our power system? When you still look at the overall Texas grid, it's still primarily natural gas, followed by, of course, wind, but then there's still a significant amount of coal on the system as well. And when you compare that with putting in a high-efficiency, clean-burning CHP system on site, overall, you have a net reduction in emissions on your site. And that's even more the case if you couple that with solar plus storage and CHP there. So you have a significant emissions reduction benefit associated with that type of microgrid that helps with meeting specific carbon neutrality goals, et cetera there. And we're also seeing CHP being used more with renewable natural gas. There's a drive by a lot of the OEMs out there to start using hydrogen, and we're seeing some systems that are actually being deployed right now using hydrogen. In this case, it's largely blue hydrogen, which is hydrogen created using a carbon capture utilization process. But we actually just did a study or worked with University of Montana in Missoula, who is putting in a new CHP system on their university, and with the expectation that within the next 5 years, it's going to be transitioning largely to a hydrogen system there. And so the OEMs are largely putting that grid flexibility within these systems to allow for that further decarbonization of the power system. There, just another mention on the emission reductions. Overall, we see, as I mentioned earlier, a significant reduction in conventional air pollutions or those criteria air pollutants, especially in the urban areas in Texas, in Oklahoma, where it's non-attainment, where the cities are non-attainment for ozone. CHP systems can significantly reduce that, as well as, once again, the CO2 reductions, the carbon emission reductions that come with the CHP systems there. Now, what everyone came for is the CHP and resilience piece of thing. And so that's, once again, a very key component. And so I'm going to go through a variety of different slides, kind of indicating that we're kind of dealing with an ongoing situation where we're potentially likely to see a higher likelihood of power systems. So once again, important to work on the decarbonization, important to push energy efficiency and reducing our demand on the system. At the same time, when you look at some of the latest reports coming out, there's a lot of already carbon in the environment that's going to, resulting in potential likelihood of extreme weather events. And so once again, baked in that regard. Just some examples here as far as what we've been seeing. This is I'm sure many of you have seen this before. It's what NOAA publishes every year about the number of billion-dollar weather events that are out there caused by a variety of natural disasters. In 2020, there were 22 of these natural disasters across the country. 11 of them happened to happen in Texas. And so we are highly susceptible in Texas, Oklahoma area to these extreme weather events. And I'm sure many of you living here have, experienced, a variety of outages and a variety of potential situations related to extreme weather. This is also from NOAA, just once again kind of showing that upward trend in the number of extreme weather events. And once again, you see it's coming from a variety of different sources. It's not just flooding, or it's not just high wind events or severe storms there. It's a variety of different types of events that are resulting in these power outages. And you see the little call out to Texas over here with their Winter Storm Uri box right there. So that's already been included in the $21 billion disasters there. The IPC report that just came out, that's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And so any of you following kind of what's happening in the climate world, Glasgow, COP26 in Glasgow is starting soon. This IPCC report recently came out, kind of just indicating there's a lot of potential increase in extreme weather events just due to the amount of carbon we have in the environment. So rapid and intensifying likelihood of extreme weather events. This is all based out of the latest climate models that came out. A lot of the stuff that people have been looking at was what comes from what's called CMIP5 data. And so that's actually from the global climate models, kind of the previous iteration. The latest iteration of global climate models is called CMIP6. And so that's really a compilation of a variety of global climate models that allows IPCC to come up with this physical science report, a basis report here that indicates a variety of changes that are happening more quickly than anticipated whenever the last IPCC report came out. So just a little context in that regard, that the most recent data is indicating an intensification of extreme weather events, much more than what was anticipated in the previous reports that came out. Next slide here is looking at electric system disturbances that are happening. Once again, a positive ongoing, not a positive in a good way, but an increasing trend in power disturbances happening across the country. Most of those are caused by extreme weather events that are out there. In some instances, we like to there's a lot of discussions about, what regard do squirrels have in this case. Although squirrels are very much involved in some power outages, it's still very much extreme weather and natural disaster events associated with this. The next slide I want to show is this is Hurricane Ida that happened, a couple months ago now, but it's really just pretty amazing as far as what essentially happened in Louisiana, and particularly in New Orleans. When you look at the power outages that happen there, so bottom right there is, of course, New Orleans. Then you have Houma just north of Lake Pontchartrain, and you have Baton Rouge to the left. And so this is pretty much day one. And what happened in New Orleans is that all of the transmission lines, all the transmission feeders into New Orleans went down, and resulting in a significant number of folks without power. Just about 1.5 million or so without power there. And it really took several days for power to come back online. And so this is the next day. New Orleans is largely red. Houma still continues to be red. Baton Rouge recovers. And then the following day. And so it just continued on for multiple days into weeks, to where you saw, a significant portion of the population out of power. And this is a major city within the United States. And to see that type of power disruption is just key. I think peak outage there was 1.1 million people. About 50% of the state was out of power. And even a week later, 34% of the population, about 750,000, were without power. And to mitigate that, they had actually put in place a new combined cycle plant in the middle of New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina to kind of help with system resilience. The problem with that is that the distribution systems went down, and so they were not able to deliver power from that new power plant there. So once again, kind of points to the importance of potentially having on-site power to mitigate a lot of that risk, especially in coastal areas or areas that are very susceptible to some of these extreme weather events. Winter Storm Uri here, I know many of you in Texas have lived through this, and just once again, a fairly significant widespread impact. We're about 5 million customers within the state of Texas. About 32% of the population was out of, or 32% of customers were out of power over a fairly long duration of time. And so actually, Sean and I were talking about some weatherization activity that's happened with the Public Utility Commission. And I hope it's not going to be the case, but the discussions around potentially lessening the push for weatherization via our utilities could be very much problematic when you look at the likelihood of these outages happening, and how prepared our residential properties and our commercial properties are to, to lessen the impacts around that, especially around the ability to, with ability of passive survivability. So ability to kind of stay in place, shelter in place when there is a major power outage. And so the key for energy efficiency in that regard and weatherization in that regard to ensure that people can stay safe and comfortable in their homes when there's the outages is going to be key. In regard, next piece there, just kind of the key reasons for why CHP is considered for resilience. Once again, very much focused on the end users there. We work primarily with end users to help them design and operate and build systems that are highly resilient, that can operate in island mode, that can have black start capability, and make sure that critical systems maintain operational over time. For utilities, largely the benefit, once again, is providing that grid stability and resilience benefits that comes by not being completely reliant on the transmission distribution system, but rather on allowing key systems to operate via a microgrid CHP system there. And for communities, largely, you're getting into a concern around ensuring critical infrastructure continues to operate, whether that's hospitals, whether that's first responders are able to respond because their facilities are working appropriately and operating appropriately, and have the necessary resources to continue to move them forward there. We run into this quite a bit as far as, well, why don't we just do a generator, or a generator works just fine, it's cheaper, we'll just crank the thing up when the power goes out and hope it continues to operate during the duration of that outage event. We find, and I'm sure many of you experienced in the past, that diesel generators and just generators in general that operate only during times of outage events may not have the greatest level of reliability or resilience, especially if you need to deliver fuel to that site. CHP operates 24/7. It's going to be operating before, during, and after an event. It's shown to be highly resilient and reliable during a variety of major outage events. Even during Winter Storm Uri, when they were turning off natural gas to the power plants, natural gas was still being delivered to residential, commercial, industrial properties to allow, largely because to deal with public health type issues associated with that. But in any case, the system's highly reliable, highly resilient, and allows it to operate a large portion of your load. You can design these systems to operate, to cover the critical loads or the entire load of your site, especially if you start coupling it with solar plus storage and CHP together there. So in any case, just important to take into account that you may get off cheap by looking at the backup generation, but you're going to end up paying for it in the long run. If you really take kind of a full life cycle assessment associated with that, and we help folks make those decisions there. Just a further example of just how CHP and a variety of different distributed energy resources work together, from battery storage, solar, CHP, generators, et cetera. And what is their impact under a variety of different natural disaster events. CHP has a tendency, especially in flooding and high winds and extreme temperatures, snow and ice, to really operate fairly well there. And when you start coupling that with a variety of other resources, you end up with a highly robust system there. Just want to give a quick example of Rice University. They do a great job both on the resilience side of things as well as on the emission reduction side of things. Not only is it my alma mater, but they do some really cool work in this regard. They've done exceptional work on using the volatility of the ERCOT grid to actually provide a nice revenue generating stream, and really reduce their operating costs significantly there. But in any case, just a really great example of using CHP in a variety of ways where it's just not, kind of cranking out 24/7 to provide, a small portion of the load, but it's covering a large load. It allows the campus to be more strategic in its operations, especially in its gas and power purchasing. And so just to point to that one as a good example there. Some of the resources that are available, the DOE did a nice job on a resilience accelerator a couple years ago, and really good resources there. It allows you to kind of better understand just different distributed energy resources and how they work together there. And then finally, just to wrap up, wanted to give you some ideas about tools and resources that are available. First of all, As I said, as the CHP TAP, we provide significant amounts of technical assistance across our region and really providing that no-cost early stage screening to see if whether or not CHP is a good fit or not, or a CHP microgrid. As I mentioned earlier, we've done it, we recently did it for the city of Houston. We've done it for, I think, Ogden, Utah recently, Fort Collins, Colorado, a variety of different cities that are trying to prioritize their efficiencies or their resilience of their systems, and making sure they have the right stuff in place. We also do a lot of third-party review. We help with procurement, RFP, RFQ type work. And then just quickly some resources here. The e-catalog I mentioned earlier provides a variety of different types of configurations of CHP systems, especially smaller systems that are much more cost-effective because you take a lot of the design and engineering costs associated with these out. The primer we have out there has been around for several years now, but does a real nice job, especially to educating decision makers about how CHP works and how it provides benefits. There are a variety of other things. Really more important is the project profiles that we have out there. We have over 200 of those available across a variety of industries and states and market sectors that really do a good job explaining best practices, lessons learned, configurations, usage, emission savings, energy savings, etc. Some fact sheets if you're interested about the technology, and then of course incentives and rebates that are out there, and they vary across the states, and we're here to help figure out what works. There is a tax credit, investment tax credit associated with CHP, as well as what's also called waste heat to power, which is grabbing that waste heat off existing generations or existing heat sources there. Just quickly, this is our contact information, so nothing too exciting there. And then finally, just wanted to sum everything up here. CHP does a variety of things, lowers operating costs, reduces emissions, provides resilience benefits. And especially when you start looking at it coupled with a variety of other types of power systems, whether that's solar plus storage or whatever that may look like. We're here to help really optimize the design of those systems to make sure that you're, getting the best out of each one of those different types of components to make sure you have a highly cost-effective, resilient, and reliable system. So please feel free to reach out to us. We're here as a no-cost free resource by the Department of Energy to help you with that resilience issues you may have. So thanks for the opportunity to discuss today.
Thank you, Gavin. Thanks for your presentation. So we have plenty of time for questions, and this is a great opportunity to really utilize all your experience and ask those questions. I always have questions, but I'm going to give a moment to see if we have anything that pop up in our chat. And participants, you're welcome to also raise your hand, and I can see if I could potentially unmute you as well. Right, there's a couple that popped in. Can you explain blue hydrogen again?
Sure. Blue hydrogen. So, and actually, there's different colors of hydrogen. So, I'll start with the different colors. So, gray hydrogen is just hydrogen that's produced without capturing the CO2 emissions associated with the production of hydrogen. Blue hydrogen is production of hydrogen, but using carbon capture utilization to grab the CO2 while the hydrogen is being produced. And then there's green hydrogen that uses renewable energy and electrolyzer to produce the hydrogens there. So green hydrogen, it would be have potentially the least CO2 impact, followed by blue hydrogen and then gray hydrogen there. And so there's a big push, especially in Texas and along the Houston Ship Channel area, Gulf Coast area, to really push for more blue hydrogen. There's a significant amount of production of hydrogen along the Ship Channel, and it seems to be an opportunity there to have that hydrogen available for industrial processes as well as for power generation purposes there. But the blue hydrogen is hydrogen production with carbon capture utilization.
Thank you.
I can go into what carbon capture utilization is if that's.
I would like, that would be great.
All right. So when we're looking at a lot of these industrial processes or the development or power generation emissions, course, you have a variety of different emissions coming out. Carbon capture utilization is essentially grabbing that CO2 and finding a variety of uses for it. There's discussions of different ways in which that carbon can be used for carbon fiber purposes or integrated into other industrial processes instead of allowing it to be emitted into the environment. So that's the carbon capture utilization. There's also carbon capture and storage. Most of that is largely focused on grabbing that CO2 and placing it within a storage well underground, whether that's a salt dome or whatever that potential type of geologic formation would be. There was actually some legislation that went through the Texas House and Senate this last legislative session that really increased the opportunities for the carbon capture and storage component there. There's a big push from the oil and gas sector to use this CO2 potentially for what's called an enhanced oil recovery. So that's used when there's an upstream production of oil and gas, where you actually push the CO2 down into the well that then promotes the production of oil and gas coming out of that well, but then you keep that CO2 within the ground. In that regard, there's also discussions around what's called direct air capture. So essentially you have, in some cases, a membrane that's set out there that can actually absorb the CO2, and that CO2 is then transported to a location where it would be stored or potentially used in enhanced oil recovery or other types of process that needs the use of the CO2 or carbon associated with that. So a variety of ways in which CO2 is looking to be utilized or stored across the globe, essentially there.
That sounds very interesting, and also sounds like another webinar. So here's another question. Do you have any CHP examples in Southcentral?
Yeah, and I think the CCHP, is that for the cooling? Is that what we're referring to in that regard? Mm-hmm. So yeah, the one of the examples that I'm most familiar with is up at Southwest Energy up in Spring, Texas. So they have a CHP system with an York absorber chiller, and that is largely put in place to provide cooling and power to their data center up there. I can pull up a variety of other ones, but that's the first one that comes off the top of my head as far as which one is available around here. We are seeing a growing interest in absorption chillers. Their costs are coming down and making them more in line, not completely in line, of course, with air-cooled and water-cooled chillers, but their costs are coming down, and there's also improved reliability of those systems than what there had been in the past. There had been some crystallization issues with the older ones, but that seems to have been figured out. And so we are getting more requests to look at these. And so, for example, in hospitals, we'll look at both thermal applications and cooling applications. So we're looking to replace their chillers. So maybe we put an absorption chiller in there, and we need to update our boilers. So we're going to replace those boilers and use the waste heat from that CHP system via a heat exchanger to provide the domestic hot water or the steam associated with that. And so we see growing applications in that regard. We're seeing some smaller, like resort communities, actually looking at the cooling technologies of CHP, as well as especially in the Upper West region, looking at CHP for cooling purposes, but then also to use that waste heat for heating pools, so they have 24/7 operations at those resorts in that regard. So kind of an interesting application there. So just to point to, there's a variety of different ways in which this is being used.
So the next event, people can just go to a resort instead of staying at home when they're not having any energy. Do the multifamily CCHP systems recommendations include holistic microgrid, thermal heat cooling storage, electric storage, and wind solar components?
The ones that we've been doing, we've been looking at more of a microgrid type of approach. Multifamily, those, especially those that are master metered, work out fairly well in this regard. And so, yeah, we see, solar on the rooftop storage and CHP, and it, of course, works out better for the CHP system if there is if the the thermal or the domestic hot water is provided by a central system in that regard. But definitely multifamily, I have one of the charts, I didn't have it in this presentation, but multifamily is one of the fastest growing uses for CHP at this point, just due to kind of its configuration and the thermal and cooling needs associated with it. And I would say most of the projects that we're looking at now, there's been a consistent request for how does a multitude of different power systems work together in that regard. And one of our guys at heart, Carlos Gamera, is our energy engineer, and his primary focus is optimizing microgrids, microgrid design, and then optimizing microgrid operation under different market environments to see what would be the best combination of systems. And not only combination of systems on the supply side, but then also how do you improve your demand side to better align with how the CHP system can work there. So there's, I would say multifamily is a very interesting area, and we've been doing a bunch of studies across the 11 states in that regard.
Do you have any of those case studies and resources on HARC's on a website, or?
They should be on, they'd be on the, let's see, I'm still sharing here. To find any of those, they would be on this DOE project profile database. So energy.gov/CHP projects.
Great, great. Then we have another question on going into more detail about the CHP project at Rice University and when it was installed and what's the size of the system.
All right, so there's this is the Rice system here. As you see, it's 7.4 megawatt system. It actually has 2 CHP engines there. It's there's a solar turbine that was recently put in, I guess a few years ago it was put in, and then they have a much older system that is not even made anymore. And I'm going blank on the name of that system, but they have 2 different engines that are, or 1 turbine and I believe an engine working in there. The solar turbine operates 24/7. The other system they bring up and down based on market conditions. And as I mentioned earlier, Rice has done a really good job kind of doing both demand response as well as utilizing their CHP system to produce power in economically optimal times, as well as bringing down their system at optimal times, and kind of importing and exporting power based on kind of market volatility there. But yeah, they have 2 systems there. You can see, I guess, yeah, 2018 was the update of the solar turbine system there. It does both the chilled water as well as the steam, and a lot of that steam is used in the research labs associated with that. During Winter Storm Uri, they continued to operate the entire time that the power was out. So they were able to provide power to the campus. Most of the students, well, of course, it was COVID, so there was not as many students as usual, but the students that were on campus were able to stay on campus. TECO, which is right across the street in the Texas Medical Center, is a 48 megawatt system. It provides the power to its, largely to its chilling system and its hot water system or heating system. That one continued to operate throughout Winter Storm Uri there as well. I'm trying to think, there is, a variety of other these systems across. UTMB has an amazing system down in Galveston. That was kind of the Phoenix Rising type of situation where they were thinking about closing down UTMB after Hurricane Ike, but instead kept it up and running and redid it, and has now I think 15 megawatts, if I'm remembering correctly, of CHP down there. It's all been elevated above storm surge level and surrounded by a flood wall or surge wall, but has continued to operate during Harvey and Uri and all these other power outage events that really missed a beat in that regard. That one's largely just a natural gas system versus, say, Rice. They have a variety of different technologies going on at Rice, but its primarily system is the CHP. I do know they're looking at solar plus storage options at Rice right now, but I'm not sure how far along they are on that one.
I have a few other questions on the Rice example. Is a 0 carbon campus. It's pretty amazing that they had that goal. And then also, how long did it take them to kind of go through the process with procurement and then making sure that their roofs were, solar ready? Because evidently, they're doing this after the fact. And do you know how many solar panels they needed to support that system?
Um, I do not know the number of panels they have deployed right now. That would be a Richard Johnson question for that. He
Okay.
leads all those design efforts associated with that. I know one of their newest buildings, their recreation center, the rooftop has solar panels on it. I'm trying to think of some of the other roofs that they may have solar on, but I can't recall. We weren't involved as much on the solar side. We were much more involved on the CHP side. It was a separate efforts there. But Richard Johnson is the head sustainability guy over there and would be perfect. Or Mark, who's mentioned here, is also a great example, and I could be happy to get people in touch with him. They do really good. They're usually really good about returning calls and talking to folks.
Great. Well, I was just interested, because you probably went to them and said, okay, this is how much you're going to need to generate, right? And then I'm looking at this photo, and Rice University has some very well-established trees. So I just, in my mind, I'm thinking operationally, wow, what a great goal they had. But then they're also having it supported by solar somewhat, that they already probably had some challenges.
Yeah.
Besides, getting their rooftops ready, but they also had, looks like, lots of shade. And then what kind of issues did you have for even siting the system?
Yeah, so for as far as the shading issues at Rice, this picture is more on the eastern, older side of the campus, and you go further west where the rec center is. It's newer trees and less shading, and it's just the building's taller, and so they have less of an issue on that side of campus. And so it's shading is a problem on one side of the campus, or more of a problem, but not as much when you go further west on the campus there. But so yeah.
Do we have any other questions? Well, we have a few minutes, so I'm going to ask you another one, Gavin. If you don't mind, this does take a step away from, with operational, but there was a few questions about residential, and you did an interesting project during URI. Do you mind just taking a few moments to talk about that with what there's also other opportunities in supporting residents?
Sure, I think so. For Winter Storm Uri, we had a project with the Department of Energy Solar Energy Technology Office. And through that, we developed a program called Powered for Good, which focuses on low-income communities. And how do we kind of start deploying solar plus storage in low-income communities? And that's both to allow folks to have access to renewable energy, 100% renewable energy, as well as have ability to be more resilient, especially for vulnerable populations that aren't able to necessarily evacuate or have access to shelters, or et cetera. So through this, and this is focused largely in kind of the deregulated market for Texas, so the ERCOT deregulated portion of Texas. And it's working with retail electricity providers, and we actually what was called white labeled a rep. So we essentially created our own rep called Energy Well Texas that allowed us to procure power at or provide power to these communities at about 9.5 to 10 cents a kilowatt hour, which in some cases, when you're looking at just kind of the population in general, that may be a bit higher than what we see. But when you look at low income populations, their average energy rate is about 14.5 cents. So the ability to get it down to about 9.5 cents was a significant reduction. And this was 100% renewable energy provided to them through this retail product. The next step in that, though, was we provided a solar plus storage option with that. And so we started looking at micro solar plus storage applications there. So provides, basic services to an apartment unit or to a house, to where, in the case of Winter Storm Uri, when we had these deployed, the users of these systems were able to, most importantly, they were able to keep their phones charged so they could get communication and communicate with others, keep some of their lighting on, and actually use them for cooking food, using a microwave in this particular case, as well as thermal blankets, things like that, that allows for, have access to a system that keeps you at least safe during the duration of this power outage. Most of the population can't afford a full house Generac system. Most of the population can't afford a solar plus storage system that can cover a significant portion of their load. And so when you're looking at low income communities, how do we most quickly advance the solar plus storage opportunity to them? And these micro solar systems allowed us to provide at least the basic necessities and services, especially to the vulnerable populations that had to keep medicine cool or how to operate medical equipment during this outage event. And so via the retail electricity product that we put together, it's a 3-year contract, and it's over a 2-year addition. There's an additional 2 cents. So instead of paying 9.5, they're paying 11.5 cents, still less than the 14.5 cents, to have that additional resilient benefit, where they're leasing that solar plus storage system there. So that was kind of the outcome of that particular project. We're actually looking at ways to scale it a bit more, move it out of a pilot stage, and we're going to be presenting to some folks over at Department of Energy next week to talk about ways in which to scale this kind of concept on a national basis there. So we, I guess, did enough work to get their interest and attention to see how we can move it forward there. So yeah, it's a pretty cool project as we continue to kind of figure out how to lessen that green divide and kind of provide overall community resilience, not just to those who can, lay out the cash immediately to afford this stuff. So
thanks, Gavin, for talking a bit about that. I just think it's a great project that you worked on, and it's aligned with microgrids. Well, I want to say thanks again for presenting today. We'll go ahead and wrap it up. I don't see any other questions. And a reminder to everyone that we'll be following up with an email with resources and a survey. And I know that I hope you learned something, because I know I did. And thanks for joining us. See you next time.
all right, thanks, Sean.
Bye.